And good afternoon, everyone. I am Susan Hoffman, the director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute here at UC Berkeley. And I am also Berkeley's Assistant Dean for Lifelong Learning. Thank you for joining our January Vital Aging Forum. It is a monthly salon of issues that we all find ourselves discussing with our friends and family about our experience as we pass through our years and decades. In the forum, we look at scientific breakthroughs, we look at good practices, we look at all the various things that are impacting our lifespan, and we talk about innovative ways to make our world more age-friendly cities, more age-friendly universities. So today's speaker and conversant is psychologist Barry Schwartz, whose academic career began at Swarthmore, or included Swarthmore, and then most recently, since 2016, has been at UC Berkeley. Barry's been on the OLLI faculty teaching at least once a year with us, and next week, he will be offering his course, Paradox of Choice, and that will begin on Tuesday mornings. And you can join either online or in person. For today, if you could add your comments and questions to the chat, and over the hour that we have with you, we will aim to, talk through as many points as you would like to ask. And then as soon as we can caption it, we will post it to the YouTube channel. I want to just mention one thing about Barry, which is not only with his teaching and his TED Talks, which I highly recommend, his research has looked at morality, decision-making, and the interrelationships between behavioral science and society. And I think there is a kind of ethics to his work, which looks at the gap between what we say and what we do. And certainly that is true of today's topic of acting on New Year's resolution, with, I hope, a lighter hand that I've just introduced it.
Yeah.
Acting on New Year's resolution or not, Barry Schwartz.
Thank you so much, Susan. You're very kind, and hi, everybody. I should tell you, this is a little advertisement. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a little piece of what this class that I'm about to start teaching is about on the paradox of choice. And I'm I'm not really going to enlighten you much about what to do about New Year's resolutions, but what I'm going to try to do is suggest that there's one particular kind of issue that we all face collectively that may loom larger than we appreciate, and it might be a good idea that if we sort of organize our New Year's resolutions around dealing with this one issue. And the issue is how to make decisions. Um, and even if the stuff I'm about to tell you about doesn't resonate that much with you because you're wise and you've had a lot of experience in the world and you make decisions effortlessly, I want you to cast an eye on your kids and or your grandkids and ask yourself whether you think they're in the same position. And I'll suggest to you that, in fact, one reason why young people in America these days are suffering and floundering so much is that we've given them a world in which decision making has become almost impossible. So you can lend a hand and a sympathetic ear to your suffering younger members of your family based on the stuff we're going to talk about today. I wrote a book 20 years ago. Whoop. My slides are not advancing. Okay. Book is called The Paradox of Choice. The world has changed a lot in 20 years, and I'm in the midst of revising it. The course will be more about the revision than the original book. And the framework I want to start with is this. It's a kind of syllogism. We all think, virtually all of us think, that the more freedom we have, the better off we are. We want to be autonomous, we want to shape our own lives, and that requires freedom. If we have freedom, we'll make mistakes for sure, but at least we have the chance to create the kind of life and the kinds of decisions that we value. So I think this is in America accepted almost without question. What does it mean then to have more freedom? Well, you don't really have more freedom unless you have more choice. You can be called free and your political leaders can call you free, but if there's really very little option available to you as you live your life, you're free in name only. And in practice, you're constrained by the limits of the society that you inhabit. So I think we all believe these two things are pretty much true. And if they are, it follows that the more choice we give people, the better off they are. And as I say, this is almost a logical, deductive relationship. So if you're worried that your kids aren't thriving, give them more choice. If you're worried that your grandkids aren't thriving, give them more choice. If you're not thriving, give yourself more choice and you'll end up better off. And there's a kind of simple assumption behind this, which is that when we are free to choose, we'll choose the things that give us the most satisfaction. And anything that restricts our ability to choose will thereby restrict the satisfaction that we get out of the decisions that we make. So we can stop the talk right now, and the New Year's resolution would be make sure that you have lots and lots of choices. But that's not where we're going, which I bet you knew. We have done a great job in society of increasing the amount of choice we have, the number of options we have. And this is true in two respects. Respect one, in a given area of life, there are more options than there used to be. And two, there are also areas of life where there didn't used to be any options, where now we have plenty of options. So let's just go through a few examples. When I was writing the book, I went through the grocery, my local grocery back on the East Coast, and just counted. And I was astonished to discover that there are 200 different kinds of cookies and 65 different kinds of toothpaste and 47 different kinds of pain reliever. There on the shelves for me to choose among. So there's a lot of choice in the grocery. We're used to that. It goes without saying that there's a lot of choice when it comes to what we put on our bodies. Um, in the old days, when you worked for a company, you were part of the company pension plan. And when you retired, you got a pension. Those days are pretty much gone. And nowadays, you participate in a 401k. And if your employer is enlightened, you may be offered 10, 20, 50, 100 different options for how to invest your retirement money in that 401k. So we are awash in choice when it comes to how we handle our savings. Consumer electronics, what can I say? Healthcare. Here's a consequential area that probably we've had more experience with these days than we did when we were 30 years younger. And that is a change, dramatic change in the way medicine is practiced in the United States. Doctors don't tell patients what to do anymore. They give you the menu and they ask you what you want to do. And you, knowing nothing, say, come on, doc, what should I do? And the doc says, I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you these are the options and these are the pluses and minuses, but it's your choice. And then you might say, doc, if you were me, what would you do? And the doctor says, but I'm not you. And so there you are, faced with potential life and death decisions, knowing almost nothing. And it's up to you to decide how a health issue, a health emergency is going to be handled. In college, when I was a student, and probably when many of you were students, there were enormous numbers of required courses, so that even though you had lots of choice, you also had lots of structure and lots of constraint. And what has happened over the years in catering to the diversity of student interests is that there are still required courses, but the menu of options that you can select from to meet those requirements is so extensive that it's quite possible that you won't encounter anybody who's taken the same required courses that you have. Nobody takes freshman English, nobody takes world history. Those courses have been replaced by millions of more specialized courses, and you are in the cafeteria picking your education from a wide array of options. The same is true in personal life. There's much more freedom when it comes to what kind of romantic relations you're going to enter into, with what kind of partner, with what kind of future trajectory. Um, it used to be that most of the questions regarding our intimate lives were answered by default. You know, everyone assumed they were going to get married, and everyone assumed they were going to have kids. And the occasional person who didn't do that was a subject of a fair amount of whispering and gossiping about how strange that person was. Well, there is no default anymore. And that what that means is that people can carve out a kind of romantic life that suits them and change their minds somewhere along the way. So there's a kind of freedom of choice when it comes to intimacy that was not present a half a century ago. What can I say about entertainment? Uh, there are, when I was growing up, we had 5 TV stations in New York, which is where I grew up. And you know, here was the weird thing. You had to watch the show when it was on. You couldn't just watch it whenever you felt like. Obviously, those days are gone. And now there are thousands, tens of thousands of options available to us. And they're always available, almost always available all the time. What a rich, entertaining life is before us. And lastly, information. Here's a question. How many podcasts do you think there are in English as we speak? You have a fair amount of choice when it comes to getting your information. I ask this question to people and they say 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, and the right answer is over 5 million. So you can decide the view of the world you're going to absorb, you're going to be exposed to, the information you're going to get by choosing your podcast from a set of 5 million. You've got to admit that is a lot of choice. The two sort of institutions that embody this best, from my point of view, are Amazon and Netflix. Amazon offers us every product that's ever been made, and Netflix seems to offer us every entertainment that's ever been made. And I'll talk in a minute about what happens when you select movies from Netflix. So the bottom line is we have an unbelievable amount of freedom of choice in modern society in comparison to the way life was like when we were younger, in comparison to the way our parents' lives were like, and so on. And the question is, so the world used to look like this. Some things were written in stone, like the Ten Commandments. And now the world looks like this. And the question is this good news or is it bad news? And the answer to that question is yes. What's good about it, I don't need to dwell on. It's obvious what's good about it. So I'm going to focus on what's less good about it. And here is where I think the New Year's resolution I have in mind comes into play. Because of what's bad about it, your resolution should be to find a way to structure your life so that the amount of choice you have, the amount of decisions you face, is kept manageable. don't welcome every opportunity to choose as a blessing. So when there is too much choice, a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is paralysis. Instead of being liberated by all the options, we can't pull the trigger. We don't know how to decide. Which movie should I watch? Maybe you have not had this experience, but I, any number of times, have settled down in the evening to pick a movie to watch on Netflix or Amazon Prime or some other streaming service. And after a half hour of searching, I throw my hands up in disgust, turn off the television, and read a book. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's good to read books. But the point is, it shouldn't be so damn hard to decide what movie to watch. And it often is. Why? Because with all those movies out there, I want the perfect one. And, Netflix is going to allow me to look at 20,000 to find the perfect one. So paralysis, instead of being liberated by options, sometimes we're paralyzed by them. And second, and this may even be worse, is that when we manage to overcome paralysis and choose, we're often less satisfied when we've chosen from a large set of options. And there are several reasons for it. So you pick your movie and you watch it. And, if you've picked a movie from a set of 10, you'll say, oh, that was a good movie. If you've picked the same movie from a set of 50, you'll go, I probably could have done better than that. And here's why. There are several reasons. One, when there are a lot of options, anything you choose that isn't perfect, it's easy to imagine that some alternative that you didn't choose would have been better. And so an imperfection in your decision leads you to regret the decision that you made, because surely something else would have been better. And the regret you feel subtracts from the satisfaction you get from the decision. So if you go to a restaurant and there are 20 entrees on the menu and you order one and it's quite good, but it isn't perfect, you can certainly convince yourself that you've made a mistake in what you chose to eat, or what movie you chose to watch, or what magazine you chose to read, or what lecture on vital aging you chose to attend. Anticipated regret in some ways is worse than regret itself, because the only way to avoid regretting decisions is not making them. And so if you anticipate that you're going to regret a decision, you just sit there and do nothing and eventually turn off the TV and read your book. I can't stop thinking about all those available parking places back on West 85th Street. For those of you who are not familiar with Manhattan, here's a couple, no doubt on Eastern Long Island shore, enjoying their vacation. But all the guy can think of is that it's August, everyone in their neighborhood's away on vacation, and he could be parking his car right in front of the damn building. So if you spend 2 weeks on the beach thinking about all the parking spaces you're missing, you might as well not be on the beach. Regret for having decided to go away when instead he could spend the whole week parking. Here's another example. This, I think, needs no explanation. The sad truth about life is that you pretty much can only be doing one thing at a time. And if you're thinking about playing golf while you work, if you're thinking about having sex while you're playing golf, and if you're thinking about work while you're having sex, you're not going to get as much satisfaction out of working or golfing or sexing as you would if you weren't comparing what you're doing to what you could be doing. The second problem that all this choice creates for satisfaction is that when there are only a few options, your expectations are probably modest and reasonable. When there are many options, a dozen options, 20 options, 50, your expectations rise. Surely one of those 50 will be perfect. And when you make your choice and you get your clothes or you watch your movie or whatever it is, what you ask yourself is not simply, was this good, but was this as good as I expected it to be? And your answer, when the set of options is large, is likely to be no. Because when there are lots of options, you expect perfect, and what you get is good, but it isn't perfect, which has led me to formulate what I guess is my watchword. The secret to happiness is low expectations. So here's a resolution for you. Walk around all day, every day, whispering to yourself, the secret to happiness is low expectations. If you keep your expectations under control, you will get more satisfaction from the decisions you make than you will if you let your expectations just explode and become unrealistic and unreasonable. There's a wrinkle to all of this, and that is there are two broad kinds of approach you can take to making a decision about what to invest, where to go on vacation, where to live, any kind of decision. One we call maximizing. I want the best. Only the best will do. The other I call satisficing. And in satisficing, you're not looking for the best, you're looking for good enough. A good enough movie, a good enough restaurant, a good enough vacation. When the choice set is large, these two approaches lead to very different behavior because the only way to know you've gotten the best is by examining every option. And when there are dozens and dozens of options, you really can't do that. Whereas if you're just looking for good enough, you don't have to examine every option. You just examine options till you find one that meets your standards, and then you stop looking. So what we find, here's an example of a maximizer. This is at first, at least to me, amusing, but imagine going to Brown, a wonderful university, and in your head every day is that sentence. Brown, but my first choice was Yale. Do you think you're going to get as much out of Brown as you could if you didn't have that sentence running through your head? Chances are not. Chances are pretty good that you will not take full advantage of what Brown has to offer because you're so convinced that if only you were at Yale, life would be perfect. And here is a satisficer. I think this is a good idea to change the wedding vow, reduce the divorce rate. My wife doesn't like when I say that. So the thing about the psychology of maximizers is that they keep searching for better options and they keep revisiting and questioning their choices. They feel more regret, they anticipate more regret, and they're dissatisfied even when they get good outcomes. In other words, maximizing is really not a recipe for well-being. More generally, we find that people who are on, in general, maximizers are more pessimistic, more anxious, more stressed, more worried, more tired, more overwhelmed, more depressed, more regretful, and more disappointed. Not a recipe for happiness. They are less content, less optimistic, less elated, less excited, and less happy. And so, having very high standards may get you better things, better decisions, but you're going to feel worse about those decisions because of the effect that that orientation has on what your expectations are. So I think this is really quite an important uh, uh, lesson to keep in mind as you try to structure your life and figure out how much flexibility to build in, how much structure to build in, how much constraint to build in, that you are not necessarily doing yourself a favor by making every possible option available to yourself. And you are not doing your kids and your grandkids a favor by making every possible option available to them either. And so if I were making New Year's resolutions, the resolution I would be is to answer the question for myself, how much freedom and how much constraint limit do I want to build into my life? And I think that can cast a shadow on almost every decision you make and almost every experience that you have. And I believe that this problem of too much freedom and too many options is contributing to the sad state of of adolescents and young adults in modern American society. In contrast to people my age, and at least some of your ages, young people ask themselves, what should I buy? And the set of options is unlimited. They ask themselves, what should I do? And the set of options is unlimited. There's a word that I think is now in the Oxford English Dictionary, FOMO, which stands for fear of missing out. I won't commit to going to this party on Friday night because something better might come up. So I won't make plans for the weekend until the last minute so that I can go to whatever is the best thing on my menu. Well, the problem is that if you don't make plans until the last minute, you really can't make plans now, can you? And so you end up limiting the set of options that you actually have available by being unwilling to commit to anything until you have all of the facts in front of you. FOMO is a major problem for young people, less so, I think, for older people. Who should I do it with? This again is about what kind of intimate relations, close friendships, marriages are what I aspire to, what I hope to create and then to sustain. Who should I be? One of the things we have found, my colleagues and I, is that when there are a large set of options, people regard the decisions they make as making a statement about who they are as people. You know, when all you've got to choose from is Lee's and Levi's jeans, then the jeans you choose don't say much about you because there just isn't enough variety in the world. But when there are dozens or hundreds of brands and styles of jeans to choose from, all of a sudden the jeans you choose do say something to you and the world about who you are. It becomes a statement about your identity. And the result of that is that even trivial decisions become non-trivial. We may not care all that much about what jeans we buy, but we certainly care about who we seem to be to the world and to ourselves. And if every decision is identity relevant, then every decision is weighty. And just to give you an example um, of how this can operate, think of the 2020 election. Remember back then when everything seemed to be paradise compared to now? So in the 2020 election, you had a choice between Trump and Biden. And it would seem that even though there were two options, which one you picked says a lot about who you are. Not so, because there are so many different reasons you might have for choosing one or the other that knowing who you vote for will tell me something about you and tell you something about you, but it won't be decisive. Prior to the general election, there were primaries in the Democratic Party, and there were 20 candidates. Knowing who you voted for in the primary tells me much more about you than knowing who you voted for in the general election, because the set of possibilities was so much broader and the differences among candidates were so much subtler. I could figure out how progressive you were, what kind of a progressive you were, what you thought about the Americans' role in foreign policy should be, and so on. I couldn't figure that out about you simply by knowing that you voted for Trump or you voted for Biden. So when the set of options increases, the decisions we make are statements to the world about who we are. And I think that all of these consequential decisions contribute to the stress young people feel, the anxiety they feel. What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to choose? The depression that is almost epidemic, and the use of drugs and suicidality. Suicide rates are high, and suicide attempts are being are happening at younger and younger ages. We are in the ostensibly in the service of making young people's lives better, giving them a problem that they simply can't solve. And so asking yourself what role you can play in simplifying and limiting to some degree the options that the people in your life face would be a terrific New Year's resolution to make. It would incidentally make your life better, although I suspect that, mostly people of a certain age don't face this problem to the same degree. But more importantly, it will make the lives of younger people better, and they need the help. So here are some more pieces of advice about what you can do about choice. So each of these you can think of as a New Year's resolution. Choose when to choose. What does that mean? It means if you need a new cell phone, instead of doing a research and choosing a cell phone, call your friend who recently got a cell phone. Ask your friend, what cell phone did you get? Ask your friend what company. Ask your friend whether he or she is satisfied. And if you get yes answers, just do the same damn thing your friend does. And save your time and energy for other decisions where you don't have that resource to count on. Not everything we choose has to be an active choice. Be a chooser, not a picker. What do I mean by that? Well, as the set of options that comes by us gets overwhelming, we can't really be very thoughtful about them because there are too many of them. And so you can imagine like you're at a sushi bar that has an assembly line of rolls just coming along, and something looks attractive, you take it off the assembly line, and if not, you let it pass. So you're not being reflective, you're not being thoughtful, you're being bombarded with options, and you pick them or not, or don't pick them. Being a chooser means not just being actively engaged, but asking yourself why. Why am I even facing a choice like this? Why? What are my aspirations here? What are my goals? What are my objectives? If you reduce the number of choices you face, you can be more thoughtful about any given one of them. So give up on some choice so that you can be more of a chooser, more active, and less of a picker. Most important, at least from my point of view, be a satisficer. Learn that or remind yourself that good enough is pretty much always good enough. The best is, first of all, almost a fantasy. Who knows what the best is? I mean, I know the best movie ever made, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. But who knows what the best is? And seeking the best is a recipe for disappointment and regret and unhappiness. So your watchword should be good enough is good enough. Practice an attitude of gratitude. We tend, when we make decisions, I guess it's because of the way we're built, what's bad about the decisions is much more salient to us than what's good about the decisions. So a decision could be good in 8 respects and bad in 2, and we'll focus on the 2 respects in which it let us down. It takes practice to get out of that negativity habit and focus more on what's good in a decision and less on what's bad in a decision. And if you do that, you will find yourself grateful for good decisions rather than disappointed because of the respects in which they aren't that good. But it takes practice. It is not most people's natural inclination to focus on what's good. They focus on what's fallen short, on what's disappointing, on what they regret having done. So it is worth practicing being grateful. And there's a trivial, almost insultingly trivial technique to use that seems to work. If you keep a pad on your bedside table, and every night before you go to bed, you write down two or three things that happened during the day that you're grateful for, you will be cultivating a habit of looking at what's good in your decisions and your life so that it becomes more automatic for you. And they don't have to be good, big things. It can be little things like a really nice article in the New York Times Magazine or something like that. Regret less, because regret poisons good decisions. Sometimes you hear people say, well, regret is a useless emotion. Let's get rid of it. I think that's a big mistake. Regret is a very important emotion. It sort of puts the decisions we make, puts italics and boldface in the decisions we make, and I think makes us more mindful of decisions we make that are bad or hurtful to other people. So it's important sometimes to be stung by regret, but it is also important not to be slavishly controlled by it. So regret less. Manage your expectations. Good enough is good enough. Don't expect that any restaurant you eat in will be the best restaurant you eat in, or any lecture you hear will be the best lecture you've ever heard. Did I learn something from this lecture? Can I learn something from this lecture? Am I a little bit wiser now than I was an hour ago? Those are reasonable questions to ask, and they suggest expectations that are modest and not unrealistically high. Compare yourselves to other people less. This is a lot harder to do than it may seem. And this, I think, is one reason why social media are having such a destructive effect on young people. Social media invite us to be comparing ourselves to other people all the time. And of course, the photos that other people put up on their social media platforms are not random samples of their life. They are, of course, the best moments of their life. And so when you're looking at how your friends are living by looking at the photos, your life is going to suck in comparison. So do compare yourself to yourself more and compare yourself to other people less. The reason this is harder than it might be is that often we rely on other people to help us make decisions. There's too much information out there. And so following what other people are deciding as a way of simplifying your life can be helpful. So there's a temptation to rely on what other people are doing to solve this information problem that we have, but it really can work to undermine the satisfaction we get out of perfectly good decisions. And lastly, learn to embrace constraints. Limits, constraints are not all bad, and they are not always bad. Sometimes the only way you can really be free to choose is if the environment within which you're choosing is constrained enough that intelligent choice is possible. And in the world of Netflix and Amazon, it has become increasingly difficult to make intelligent choice. In a world with 5 million podcasts in English, it is impossible to make an intelligent choice. You rely on recommendations that you get from other people or something like that. And so constraining, limiting the environment of options can be a blessing in an environment where choice is overwhelmingly great. In other environments, in totalitarian or authoritarian societies, we need to reduce those constraints. We need to break those barriers. But just because there can be too much constraint doesn't mean there can't also be too little. And so figuring out what kind of constraints you need, what kind of constraints you need to be operating within, and then figuring out how to put those constraints in place and then honor them will probably make your life more satisfying and easier to negotiate than if you simply assume that the freer I am to make decisions, the better the decisions will be that I make. And this last slide captures this idea. The parent fish tells the baby, you can be anything you want to be, no limits. And here is this goldfish bowl with nothing in it. What do you mean, no limits? There's like nothing going on there, right? The important idea here, I think, is that if you shattered that goldfish bowl so that anything was possible, almost all of the new things that were possible would be catastrophic. The goldfish needs the bowl. So do we. We need more in our fish bowl than a little plastic castle and a little sand. And we don't know what we need in our fish bowl. This is a complicated question to figure out. So you need a rich enough environment to enable you to live the kind of life you think you should live. But shattering the fish bowl so that everything is possible is really a recipe for bewilderment and misery. So we can all collectively ask, what is it that we need in our fishbowl so that it will enable us to do what we think matters and not paralyze us with confusion and uncertainty so that we can't do anything at all. So I wish you a world of limited but enriching choice in the year ahead. And I thank you for your time and attention. And I guess there's some time for some questions.
Let's take some questions. And I think, Barry, that last part reminds us of a previous Vital Aging where about decluttering. It's like what to take out of that glass bowl.
That too, that too.
Right, right.
I don't think that's the goldfish's problem, but it may be ours.
Certainly. So let me ask you this. Do you yourself make New Year's resolutions?
No,
And why not?
because I'm already living a perfect life.
Ah, you,
No, I'm being a wise ass. I,
ah,
I don't make New Year's resolutions because I know that people don't honor their New Year's resolutions.
uh-huh.
Everybody joins a gym in January, goes 3 times in January, twice in February, and never again. The trick is not to make New Year's, the trick is to pay enough attention to the structure of your life that you get help in honoring those resolutions. And so here's an important piece of practical advice. When you make a New Year's resolution, make sure that you include what we call implementation intentions. Not just, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, but I'm going to lose 10 pounds by changing my diet in this set of ways. And so when the time comes for you finally to act on it, not only do you have a goal, but you also have a plan. What people often do is they set the goal, but they don't set the plan. And very quickly the goal loses steam and they're nowhere. If at the same time you're setting the goal, you're also constructing the plan, you're more likely to start acting on the plan. So that is a tip for taking New Year's resolutions seriously enough that you might act on them.
Thank you for that. So I have had forever a New Year's resolution, which I have again for this year, which is dance more, way less. So but I haven't put enough of an implementation plan together.
Well, those two things, they're nice compliments. If you dance a lot more, you
Right,
will weigh less.
really. Well, I think, and you introduced a term to us, satisficing.
Yes.
Is that your term?
No, it's not. A very distinguished economist, psychologist coined that term 70 years ago because the term that is familiar to people in economics is maximizing. We want to maximize return on investment. We want to maximize our uh, net worth, you know, get the best out of your investments that you possibly can. You want to maximize your education. Um, and what he argued was that we aren't smart enough to maximize. It's too hard. It's too hard, even in the world of the 1950s, let alone this world. There are too many variables, there's too much uncertainty. We don't have the cognitive horsepower to maximize. What we can do is seek good enough and recognize that it's good enough and then choose it. And he suggested that over time, what might happen is that what's good enough will keep on getting better. It's good enough on Tuesday to have Rice Krispies, but by Thursday I want a cereal that has more nutritive value. So my standard slowly edges up, and I'm always looking for good enough, but good enough now has to meet a higher standard that
Mm.
simplifies the decision enormously, and it ends up in the end moving you in the direction of ending up with the best cereal. So his was an argument that we're simply not smart enough to maximize, and that we don't need to. And I borrowed the term and gave it a little more psychological and emotional tone.
Mhm. Well, it definitely has resonance. So, an iPad person, unidentified, wants to ask you the question, knowing that you're in front of Netflix and other myriad of choices. What is your favorite movie, and how did you make your choice?
It isn't my favorite movie. Let me make that clear. It is simply the best movie ever.
Ah,
I,
okay.
I hope you don't mind if I impose my values on everybody. It's The Godfather.
Oh,
I mean, I'm unimaginative. Godfather Part One and Two is something I feel almost a commitment to see at least once a year. I know them by heart, and I can't imagine a better movie than those
uh-huh.
two together. Sorry, guys. As I say, I don't have imaginative taste when it comes to the arts.
Well, I think Harry Chotner, who teaches our diving into the movies, which starts on Wednesday, The Godfather is his favorite film.
All right, I feel a little better.
And so I'm looking, I know Godfather 3, I think, was
That
filmed.
no, 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 no. That doesn't count.
Okay. And
Godfather 3 is an unmitigated catastrophe.
uh, I have a Godfather 3 story, which I'll tell you sometime. So this is, I think that you've given us the kind of the seed bed uh, for making choice and making New Year's resolutions. And I think that it also, I mean, as I told you before we started, I like the fact that you're casting it as how do we make for a better environment for our children and
Mhm.
grow? How do we know that limiting their choice can be a very healthy and happy thing? I know artists talk about this all the time, that they oftentimes can create better with limited choice.
Yep. And when you've got every wavelength uh, that exists on your palette, I don't know how you even start the painting.
Mm,
And it's always seemed to me that the thing I have most responded to in the creative arts myself is achievements that are done within constraints, because that provides an obstacle that needs to be overcome. And the question is just how imaginative, creative, and inventive can I be given the limited set of materials I'm starting with? And I admire the especially self-imposed constraints that artists will sometimes put on
Oh,
themselves.
yeah.
And I think sometimes they appreciate that being free to do anything makes it impossible for them to even begin.
Sure. The
So,
paralysis you talk about. Yeah.
but it's, as I say, the ideology of American society and Western European society goes in exactly the opposite direction. If you don't want the freedom, you don't have to use it. But
Hmm.
give everyone complete freedom, and people will use as much of it as they want, and that has to be better than imposing constraints. And
Hmm.
maybe in theory that's right, but in practice it's not right. It really causes suffering.
Yeah. Well, I'm also uh, thinking about just so many ways to take this. I mean, as you were talking, as you began to talk about this particular thing, I was thinking about Gerhard Richter's painting when he was in East Berlin and what that wall meant and that being cut off and him, at any rate, and
Yeah,
how it influenced his own choices. And I know what it's meant for me and my own choices, as a filmmaker. I, I missed signing up for a rehearsal room down at the American Film Institute. So that meant that I had to rehearse my actors in where the equipment was. And the only thing in there was a bed, a mattress on the floor. So I said, okay, the scene's going to be on the floor on a mattress.
yeah.
And it turned out incredibly, that I just immediately, I had a focus for what to do,
And,
and
and,
yeah,
and what's nice about something like that is that there's a sort of standard decorating of the set that you would probably do if you had everything available to you. And that would really limit your imagination because you have these objects that people have to be interacting with. And so when all that is stripped away and you ask, well, how can we make this what we want, given all we've got is a piece of foam on the floor?
right.
It really juices you to think harder and I think more inventively about what the point is of this scene that you're directing. Um, it doesn't always work that way, sometimes all of the tools that have people have at their disposal get enable them to do things that are just breathtaking.
Hmm.
Um, but it isn't automatically true that more is better. That's what it
Well,
comes down
and I
to.
think at some point, maybe you incorporate into a lecture that The Godfather is your favorite film.
Yes.
You should compare it with, Coppola's latest film, which
Which I
is,
haven't seen yet.
which has, what choice was there? But everything.
Yeah. Well, sometimes a little bit of egomania gets in the way.
But I think at any rate, well, this is lovely to have this exchange with you. If there are not any other questions or comments, Dee Dee says, how can a society such as ours that is so focused on freedom and choices come to see that some constraints are valuable?
Ah, I wish I knew how to answer that question. And the problem is twofold. It isn't just that we're so focused on freedom and choice. It is also that if you decided you would call a national gathering to discuss this question, you would find that lots of people have very strong ideas about the constraints that should be imposed, and they just won't agree with one another. So what you end up doing after you try to say, well, this is going to be the framework within which we operate, and you can't get agreement, is you say, just let people do whatever the hell they want. So the combination of the pluralistic nature of American society, which virtually guarantees that there won't be the kind of agreement you need, and the ideology that freedom is good and more must be better, pushes my concern really into the background. And I wish I could tell you that I knew how to deal with this problem, but I don't. And of course, as we all know, in the last decade, as bad as this problem was before, it's gotten ever so much worse. Because when people, you can't even get people to agree on simple facts of the matter, how are you going to get them to agree on what's valuable and what isn't? So, anarchy or nihilism is sort of the best you can do until we change the tenor of our social and political life. And I don't know how that's going to happen.
That is the question that's in front of us for sure.
It certainly is.
Yeah. Barry, thank you very much for spending the hour giving us your this whole framework around to think about choices, think about our expectations, and how to share that with not only ourselves and our interior around more gratitude, but also how to share that with our loved ones. So as we go forward, this was a great way to start 2026.
It was really my pleasure. Thank you all for coming. I hope maybe if some of you who are tempted by this little story I'll see you again on Tuesday when I teach the first session of the class, which will be same sort of theme, but in much more detail. So
Great.
thank you all so much and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you and to everyone. One more thing. In February, our Vital Aging will be with Dr. Debbie Gold, who is going to be talking about vaccines and RFK and where the country is going with all of public health recommendations. So please join us. See you then.
And make sure you bring your beef tallow.